The awakening went quiet, and you are never going backward. You need to hear that before anything else, because the shame of this silence has been sitting on your chest for months, and no one in your life has been able to tell you what it means. The rush is over. The initial shock of your awakening, the torrent of insight that tore through you like a current, the sudden shedding of habits that had been rotting you from the inside for years, the feeling of expansion so vast you thought you would never fit back into the old shape of your life. All of it has evaporated. In its place is a flat, unyielding emptiness that you cannot explain to anyone, because the people who watched you transform are now watching you sit still, and they assume you are failing. You look around at the lack of momentum. You feel a creeping secret dread. You assume you did something wrong. You assume you are sliding backward into the person you used to be, but you are not. And the reason you are not is something Carl Jung understood that the modern spiritual framework you were given completely ignores. It maps the earthquake, but it says nothing about the silence that must follow. And the silence is not where the work ends. The silence is where the real architecture begins. You did not fail the awakening. The awakening finally succeeded in quieting your ego. You wake up now with no desire to meditate, no desire to read the philosophy books that felt like oxygen a year ago, no desire to optimize, to refine, to dig deeper into your shadow as if there were always another layer to excavate. You feel entirely ordinary, flat, blank in a way that carries weight, because the blankness does not feel like peace. It feels like abandonment, like the thing that saved you simply left in the middle of the night without a note. You carry a quiet, heavy shame because you were told that waking up meant living in a state of constant, radiant connection, that once you saw the truth, you would feel alive forever. Every spiritual framework you consumed, every podcast, every book that cracked you open over the last 2 years promised the same trajectory. Darkness, then light. Collapse, then expansion. Sleep, then permanent luminous awareness. Nobody mentioned this. Nobody warned you about the dead gray corridor where the light has finished its work and withdrawn, leaving you standing in a room that looks exactly like your old life, except now you cannot pretend it was ever going to be enough. And the worst part is that you cannot talk about it, because the people who never experienced the awakening will not understand the void, and the people who are still in the middle of their own will hear you describing the quiet and assume you are warning them that the light does not last. You are not warning them. You are drowning in a silence you cannot name. And the loneliest thing about it is that the vocabulary for this season does not exist in any of the books that brought you here. Jung warned about exactly this disorientation. When the massive influx of psychic energy subsides, when the unconscious material that erupted during the initial awakening has been partially integrated by the conscious mind, the individual is left in what he described as a dead balance. The drama of the initial realization burns itself out. The ego, which was briefly illuminated by the flood of unconscious content, feels impoverished and abandoned. Not because the transformation failed, because the transformation finished its loudest phase, and the ego does not know how to exist in a room that is no longer on fire. You are not losing your edge. You are not regressing. You are addicted to the adrenaline of your own healing. You have mistaken the absence of spiritual drama for a failure of spiritual growth. And the mistake is understandable, because every source you trusted framed the process as a continuous escalation of awareness rather than what it actually is. A detonation, followed by rubble, followed by the slow, silent construction of something that the detonation could never have built on its own. But the reason this silence feels so heavy is because of a subtle trap your mind fell into right after you woke up. Because the moment you experienced your initial breakthrough, your ego immediately attempted to weaponize it. Think about what happened in the weeks after you changed. You wanted to tell everyone. You felt uniquely insightful. You looked at the people around you, the ones still trapped in the patterns you had just escaped, and you felt a distance from them that you mistook for elevation. You started curating your identity around the awakening itself, You read differently, you spoke differently, you began recommending books to people who had not asked. You started sentences with, "Since my awakening," without noticing the way the room shifted when you said it. You began to build a new persona, not the old toxic one, but a spiritual one, gleaming and refined, assembled from the vocabulary of depth psychology and inner work and conscious living. And it fit you like armor. Better armor, in fact, than anything the old identity had ever provided. Because this one came with a moral framework that made the wearer feel not just protected, but superior. But recently, the urge to explain your depth to others has vanished. The spiritual identity you constructed to replace the one you shed now feels just as exhausting and artificial as the original. You cannot sustain the performance of being awake any more than you could sustain the performance of being asleep, and the recognition of this has left you in a specific kind of vertigo that no framework prepared you for. Jung called this ego inflation. The conscious mind absorbs the raw energy of an encounter with the unconscious and uses it to inflate itself, to puff up, to declare itself the master of a process it did not initiate and cannot control. The first crossing, the initial awakening, is dramatic and intoxicating precisely because the ego claims ownership of it. I woke up, I healed, I am no longer who I was. Every one of those statements places the ego at the center of a process that originates far beneath it. The second crossing, the true initiation, begins only when the ego realizes it is not the master of the awakening. It is its subject, and this realization does not arrive as insight. It arrives as exhaustion. You get tired of explaining your transformation. You get tired of the vocabulary. You hear yourself say the words shadow work, or inner child, or holding space, and something inside you flinches. Because you can feel the performance in it now, and you cannot unfeel it, the inflation collapses. The spiritual identity you built from the rubble of the old life reveals itself as just another costume, and you are left standing in a colder, cleaner air, stripped of both the old mask and the new one, with nothing to wear but the bare fact of your own existence. Your awakening was never meant to make you special. It was meant to make you authentic. And true authenticity is entirely invisible to the crowd. When the ego finally collapses under this realization, the psyche initiates a drastic defensive measure. To protect the genuine transformation from being turned into a performance, the mind walls you off from the outside world entirely, and the isolation that follows is not what you think it is. You are not depressed. You know this because you have been depressed before, and this does not carry the same chemical signature. You still function. You eat, you work, you take care of what needs to be taken care of, but you are radically isolated in a way that feels structural rather than emotional. The noise of small talk, social climbing, and external validation physically repels you. You decline invitations without guilt. You let phone calls go to voicemail from people you once chased. You sit in your home in absolute silence, and for the first time in your life, the silence does not feel like loneliness. It feels like architecture, like something is being built around you that you did not commission and cannot see. You have noticed that your nervous system has changed. Environments that used to energize you now drain you within minutes. Conversations that used to feel nourishing now feel like static. You leave gatherings early, not because you are antisocial, but because your body is drawing a boundary your conscious mind has not yet articulated. Something inside you is refusing to let the noise back in, and the refusal is not a choice. It is a directive coming from a place deeper than preference. Your friends think you are withdrawing out of sadness. Your family assumes something is wrong. The people who watched your initial transformation with admiration are now watching your stillness with concern. They are interpreting the quiet as a collapse because they cannot see what is being constructed on the inside. Jung recognized this as the formation of the temenos. In psychology and alchemy, He described it as a protected sacred space, a taboo area where the psyche could undergo its deepest reorganization without interference from the collective world. The Taminos is not a retreat, it is a quarantine. The psyche builds it instinctively when the transformation has reached a stage where external input becomes contamination. The noise of the world, the opinions of others, the demand to perform normalcy, all of it threatens the fragile, silent process happening beneath the surface. You are not an empty well, you are a deep well. To the superficial observer, both look dark from the top. Your darkness is the result of profound depth, not absence. The surface can no longer see the water, not because the water is gone, but because the well has been deepened beyond what the surface was ever designed to measure. What emerges inside this protected space is a capacity you could never have accessed while you were still fighting. The alchemist's path was written for exactly this moment. The moment you recognize that the silence you feared was actually the first stable ground you have stood on since the awakening began. Jung-based boundary drills, perception training for empaths, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. 236 pages, downloadable now at thesurrealmind.com. Because what is happening inside you is a fundamental shift in the way you relate to your own mind. You used to constantly analyze yourself. You spent months, maybe years, trying to root out every last fragment of your shadow. You kept a journal. You interrogated your motives. You dissected your childhood wounds with the precision of someone performing surgery on their own body without anesthesia, because you believed that if you could just find the final piece, the last hidden wound, the deepest buried pattern, you would finally be free. That compulsion has stopped. Not because you gave up, because the relationship between the observer and the observed has changed. Now, when a familiar fear arises, you watch it. You see it enter the room of your mind the way you would watch a stranger walk through a train station. You notice its shape, its weight, the direction it is moving, but you do not chase it. You do not try to fix it. You do not perform the elaborate therapeutic ritual of naming it, tracing it to its origin, confronting it, reframing it, and releasing it. You simply let it exist, and it passes through without incident, not because you are numb, because you are, for the first time, holding the tension of what you feel without collapsing into the need to resolve it. You have felt this most clearly during moments that would have previously shattered you. A crisis unfolds at work, or a family member pulls the same manipulative maneuver they have pulled for 30 years, or someone you trusted says something that reveals they never understood you at all. And instead of the old cascade, the adrenaline surge, the obsessive replaying, the frantic need to control the outcome, you simply watch it happen. You feel the emotion arrive, and you let it sit beside you without giving it the steering wheel. This is not apathy. This is the first time in your life that your awareness has become larger than your pain. Jung described this as the transcendent function. It does not proceed without aim and purpose, he wrote, but leads to the revelation of the essential man. The production and unfolding of the original potential wholeness. This is the stage beyond the seeker and the finder. The individual develops the capacity to hold the opposing forces of the psyche, the light and the dark, the divine and the animal, the wound and the strength built on top of it, without demanding that one conquer the other. You are no longer the hero of the story. You have been demoted to the witness. And the demotion feels like the heaviest relief you have ever experienced, because the hero was exhausted. The hero had been sprinting for years, armed with journals and therapeutic frameworks and an inexhaustible conviction that if they just worked hard enough at healing, they would arrive at a place where the pain could not reach them. The witness understands that no such place exists, and the witness is not devastated by this. The witness is relieved because the search was the heaviest thing they were carrying, and it has finally been set down. And because you are no longer trying to fix yourself, the way you interact with the future has altered permanently. You stop looking for your grand purpose. You notice this gradually, and it disturbed you at first, because the anxiety over what you are supposed to do with your life had become such a familiar companion that its absence felt like a new kind of emptiness. You used to lie awake at night running scenarios, building visions of the person you could become if you just found the right vehicle for your transformation. You imagined writing the book, starting the practice, building the platform, leading the retreat. You imagined a life where your awakening had a function, a product, an output that the world could recognize and validate. That fantasy has gone quiet, and in its place is a strange, almost unbearable realization. You do not want to start a movement anymore. You do not want to change the world. You do not even want to explain yourself to the people who are still asking what you plan to do next, as if the transformation were supposed to produce a business plan. The frantic desire to do something with your awakening has been replaced by the terrifying demand to simply be it, to let the depth exist without converting it into currency, to stop trying to make your inner life legible to a world that only values what can be measured, monetized, or displayed. Jung separated this with surgical precision. He distinguished the collective obsession with purpose, which is a conscious, ego-driven project designed to make the individual feel significant within the social order, from the inescapable reality of vocation, which is the quiet, objective truth of the self that persists whether anyone sees it or not. He asks the question that dismantles every anxious search for meaning in a single breath. Whose life have you been living? The development of personality, he wrote in volume 17, is at once a charisma and a curse, because its first fruit is the conscious and unavoidable segregation of the single individual from the herd. Your purpose is not ahead of you. It is the exact ground you are standing on right now. The mundane daily existence you have been dismissing as ordinary is not the waiting room for your real life. It is the real life. The way you hold silence in a room full of noise. The way you listen to someone without performing the listening. The way you move through a day without needing it to produce proof of your significance. That is the vocation. Vocation is not a job title, it is a quality of presence. And the moment you stop asking the question answers itself. You thought the quiet meant you were lost. You scroll through the accounts you used to follow, the teachers, the channels, the voices that guided you through the first phase, and their language no longer lands. The metaphors feel too bright. The promises feel too clean. The constant invitation to go deeper, expand further, ascend higher sounds like it was written for someone standing at the base of the mountain, not for someone who climbed it and found the summit empty. You do not resent them. You simply cannot hear them anymore. Their frequency and yours are no longer the same, and the loneliness of that recognition is the loneliness of a person who has graduated from a school that does not issue diplomas. You have been measuring your progress against a map that was designed for the initial phase of awakening, the seismic, explosive, ego-shattering phase, and finding that your current coordinates do not appear on it. You concluded that you must have wandered off the path, that the stillness you inhabit is a deviation from the trajectory you were promised. But Jung understood that the post-individuation phase is the first time a human being walks entirely without a map, not because the terrain is empty, because you have finally become the kind of person who can navigate the dark. The map was always a crutch. It existed to guide the ego through territory the ego was not equipped to cross alone. The books were the map. The podcasts were the map. The therapists and the teachers and the late-night conversations where you dissected your own psyche until you could barely stand were all cartography for a landscape that could only be crossed once. You crossed it. And now the terrain ahead of you has no precedent, because no one who has reached this point has arrived here by the same route as you. The landmarks are your own. The path forward is authored by your own quiet, reorganized interior. The ego has been quieted, and the self, the deeper organizing principle of the psyche, the one Jung spent his entire life describing, has taken the wheel, and the self does not need directions. It does not consult. It does not ask permission. It simply moves with a gravitational certainty that the conscious mind experiences as silence. You are not going backward. You are standing in the most honest, most alive place there is. The void is not a punishment, it is the foundation. The profound flatness you have been experiencing is not a regression. It is the definitive proof that the chaotic construction phase of your psyche has finished, and the heavy doors of the inner sanctuary have been sealed shut. You will not feel the fireworks again. That is the part no one tells you, and it is the part that must be said without softening. The initial awakening was a one-time event. It was the controlled demolition of a structure that was never supposed to be permanent, and the blast radius was magnificent, and it is over. What remains is not a lesser version of that explosion. It is the thing the explosion was designed to make room for. A foundation poured in silence, a dwelling built from the inside out. A life that does not need to perform its own aliveness in order to believe in it. Let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. You do not need to generate more light. You simply need to inhabit the quiet you have earned. The awakening did not abandon you. It completed its work so thoroughly that the only thing left to do is to stand in the cathedral it built inside you and stop asking when the next earthquake is coming. The earthquake is over, the architecture holds, and the silence is not empty. It is full of you. If this video named the exact season you are living in right now, and you have been carrying the shame of this quiet without a single person in your life who could tell you what it meant, leave a comment below. I read them, and if there is someone you know who woke up beautifully and then went terrifyingly still, and you have been watching them from the outside wondering if they are okay, send them this video, not as advice, as recognition. The Alchemist's Path. Perception training for empaths was built for the ground you are standing on right now. The moment after the storm, the moment you stop asking what went wrong and start learning to live inside the answer. Jung-based boundary drills, perception training for empaths, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. 236 pages, downloadable now at thesurrealmind.com.